All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining us once again. We are here from the ESCO Institute, HVAC Excellence, to talk about a little bit of workforce development as we start moving into new technologies, especially in refrigerants and in the equipment itself. And so we have the opportunities to start bringing in new ways to look at recruitment and development of our programs. So we have Howard Weiss joining us. Howard, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Clifton. Thanks for letting me be here.
Ty Brandeman hanging out with us here.
Thanks for having me.
Daniel Mendoza back here shooting video. And Danielle Wright from NASRC. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me here.
All right, so let's think about ways that our industry is moving forward. Now, we all see challenges in the classroom, Ty. We always talk about how many times we have difficulties recruiting into the classroom and especially bringing in new technologies into the classroom. But Howard, when we look at statistically, where are we standing, let's say, from 10 years ago in the industry?
You know, you and I have this conversation all the time as far as technology's moving so quickly, but the programs don't see it.
Exactly.
And the greatest metaphor we could bring up is we keep bringing up the automotive industry.
Yes.
In the late 70s, we had this thing called an oil embargo in 1979.
Yep.
And you could buy your gasoline on even or odd days until they ran out.
Isn't that crazy to think about?
And we didn't get rid of the internal combustion engine.
No, we just made it better.
We made it better by getting rid of the carburetor.
Yeah.
But when we did that, what happened? All of a sudden, gas station bays started closing. Why? Because there was such a technological shift in the industry, the automotive industry was forced to change.
Yeah.
I see so many things happening right now, from natural refrigerants to next generation heat pump technologies. Many people in the HVAC industry don't realize what's about to happen to them is what happened in the late 70s, early 80s in the automotive industry.
Absolutely. I think about it from my time growing up working on vehicles. I mean, I personally worked on vehicles as a teenager, something I enjoyed doing. I rebuilt a lot of carburetors. I did a lot of timing adjustments with the timing light and mechanical adjustments. I did, you adjusted distributors. You did a lot of mechanical items. And when the automotive industry made that transition, I was fortunate to be there in that 80s, late 80s and into the early 90s as a person working on my own vehicles. And I was very intimidated by the technologies because all of a sudden I'm going from all mechanical adjustments into solid state electronics that had position sensors and temperature sensors and pressure transducers. And it was all calculated by a ECM or ECU, whichever manufacturer you're talking about. It's just a processor, right? So I was able to pick up the technology transition going from mechanical into full digital. And it was actually very intriguing, a little intimidating at first. But then once you learn that you can take something, I can take an internal combustion engine and simply make it better by controlling it more efficiently. And now we're moving into these transitions with equipment where we look at our internal compression system, right? I mean, we talk about a vapor pump, a compressor, it's an internal compression engine. Well, can we do the same thing with it? Can we take our mechanical controls and make it much more efficient? And we really do. So not only do we have the technology transition going on, we have refrigerant transitions going on. And so we have to look at the opportunities to prepare our programs for what is coming down the pipeline. And we have to do it now because we all know how long it takes. Ty, if we're bringing in a new piece of equipment into the classroom, realistically, how long could it take if I'm not well prepared for that?
Anywhere from 6 months to 3 years.
Exactly. So if we look at the long term and go, okay, if I'm a program where I have to establish my funds early on, I have to get a curriculum in place, I have to make a plan for purchasing equipment, and I have to submit all of this with numbers for review, it can take a little bit of time. So we have to make sure we know what the resources are there. So if we're talking about equipment, we have a lot of things we can dive into, especially when we're getting into cold climate inverter heat pumps. We are now seeing our refrigerant transition where we're moving from A1 refrigerants into A2L refrigerants and even A3 refrigerants. But we also have an entirely other new realm of refrigerants to talk about. So Danielle, let's talk a little bit about things that are happening in the transitions in the classroom and in the ability to bring in curriculum and material for natural refrigerants as well, like CO2 maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, going back to your car analogy, it's like we're going from combustion engines to electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Right?
Making a big transition.
Huge transition, totally different system, but there's some similarities and, a whole lot more controls.
Exactly.
So the learning curve there can be really steep, and it can look steeper than it is depending on if you have a good teacher. And so we're finding that at the very basic level, when students are getting exposed to refrigerants and refrigeration for the first time,
Sure.
those instructors are not necessarily equipped or haven't been taught, haven't had a chance to learn the latest technologies using CO2, propane, and ammonia in some cases, and A2Ls as well.
Yeah.
The whole new generation of refrigerants.
Yep. I think about, as an instructor, most of us instructors, Ty, we come out of the field, right? We're technicians. We spend time in the field. We get good at what we're doing, and then we make a transition into the classroom. Well, what if we've never worked on things like CO2 out in the field? What if we've never worked on inverter heat pumps that operate in cold climates? Sometimes it's difficult to bring that into our curriculum when we're not comfortable ourselves. So sometimes it's about finding the actual curriculum to be able to bring into our working space. So let's talk about curriculum a little bit and ways as instructors that we can reach out and have resources for some of these new refrigerants.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we're really excited about is this project we've been working on with ESCO Group for the last few years, building the CO2 curriculum, leveraging the knowledge base and the resources we have at NASRC, which is really refrigeration focused, right? We specialize in working with grocery stores and helping to accelerate the adoption of CO2, propane, and ammonia. And so working on the CO2 curriculum, that's going to be the foundation, right? First step for so many of the instructors themselves to get up to speed so that they can turn and teach their students. And a lot of what we found when we were talking with instructors, because we did a big survey to try and better understand some of what's driving this technician shortage. And we went back to the very root of it. It's the R. It's the refrigeration training is really missing from their curriculum to begin with. So that's why we're really excited about bringing this to the classroom, and specifically because it's focused on CO2. It can help prepare those students for the next generation of refrigeration equipment.
Right.
I see two problems, though.
Okay, let's talk about it.
You hit on something. You can't teach what you don't know.
No, exactly.
So I always joke that one of the biggest problems in HVAC education is most teachers, Ty, welcome to teaching. Here's your set of keys.
Hey, have fun. You know what you're doing, don't you? Right?
I want you to go teach HVAC like it's a singular subject, the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, you used to have 2,800 hours in your program, now it's 650.
Exactly.
So we want you to teach all this new technology at a quarter of the time we used to. So I see two of the biggest challenges in teaching right now, teaching what you don't know and doing it in less time than ever before.
Yeah, absolutely. Ty, let's think about in the classroom, exactly when we're talking about this, where if we've not worked on something in the classroom, like if you had a new item that you wanted to bring into the classroom, didn't matter what it was, what was the mental preparation that you would want to think about before you get it into the classroom?
RTFM, read the fabulous manual first.
Yes.
That's where there's so much information right there.
Absolutely.
And that's a huge step. I mean, if I could change one thing, that would be it. I have a book from an old book from Willis Carrier.
Yeah.
And when Willis invented the air conditioner as we know it, there wasn't a school or a manual. He had to write everything. So he literally took what he knew, put it in the text, and then from there they built schools on that book. It was related to that. So you have to actually start somewhere. And then you end up with people saying, well, it's just book stuff. Well, really, if you look, the man that actually invented it is communicating just like we're communicating now.
Absolutely.
In words. Just now we have better methods of doing that with video and with talking. But the first thing is, look at the book. I struggle with reading. For me, reading stuff is very challenging. I have to have a very quiet room. I have to have highlighters and pens, but I force myself to it because that's how I can talk to the person that invented it. That's how I can communicate with what their idea is. So the first thing is to understand that. And then I go out and just try to transition that information. I taught many classes on CO2, although I've never worked on CO2 myself.
Sure.
And I felt like an imposter,
right?
Because I was teaching CO2 that I never worked on.
Sure.
But the fact is, all I have to do is teach those fundamentals, teach that basis how it works.
Right.
Then they're going to take that and work on it. For example, I took golf lessons. Now, golf is not my thing. I took golf lessons, how to hit the ball. And I suck at golf. Golf is horrible.
Right. But you
the
try.
ball goes far to the right, I play multiple different courses.
Yeah.
I just like the driving range, drink some beer, hit the balls. But I did the very same thing. I taught somebody else all those same steps I did, and they were able to take that information and drive it way out there. So for me, I don't have to have all that specific experience and all the years on CO2. If I can get that information to them so that somebody else can drive that career, drive that long shot, then that's what I want to do. And a big step of that is new things. As humans, we get scared of new information.
Yeah.
But if we look at the gas furnace, like everybody's like, oh, I love gas. And I do too. I grew up in Texas, like gas is a big thing.
Right.
But the gas furnace wasn't invented until 1920 by Alice Parker.
Sure.
1920. If we look at the history of things, that's not that long of a time frame. And so the gas furnace is new to us because we were around it. But once upon a time, it was new because we had oil.
I mean, we had oil guys going, what?
Coal.
We're putting a motor on this thing to move air? How's that going to work? There was
It's just that technology is going to be changing. And first, we have to realize that change is going to happen, whether you like it or not. I hate it when people say, oh, the young people. I'm like, I'm a young people to my older generations. Like, it's times are changing, adapt to it. And I love it when young people get mad about some of the older people. I'm like, you're going to be there
one day.
Because I look back and be like, there used to be a store right there. And I'm like, oh my God, I turned into my dad. But change is happening and we have to adapt. Change is the one thing you can bet on is going to continue to happen. And we fight it. We spend our whole time fighting it, but it's happening. The biggest thing is you learn about the change, you adapt to it, you're ahead of the curve. So whether it's CO2 or ammonia or R290, and I'm from Texas, we love R290 and R290 accessories. Whatever it is, adapt to it, learn about it, and then from there you can still dislike it, but at least you can learn about it and make money on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Howard, let's talk about bringing new technologies into the classroom. Let's talk about some of the struggles that we see from our programs and from influence from our communities to bring these new technologies into the programs.
That's a great question. I see the schools that struggle.
Yeah.
And so let's tackle some of the things that they're really dealing with. Number one, I can't teach what I don't know.
Right.
So let's teach them, whether it be your show, our conference, this event. There's still other obstacles. Why won't they teach it? Well, there's no curriculum.
Sure.
So we're gonna develop a curriculum. But now we have the other problems. Is the supplemental. So we get through all these things. Then we realize here's this big obstacle in front of us, the program advisory board. Unless there's buy-in from them, are we going to talk about natural refrigerants in this program? No. So a lot of times we have to make certain if we see where the changes are in the industry, we need to show up at these events. If we don't,
encourage it.
Yeah. I know schools that want to change their curriculum, but the people who are showing up saying,
we only want to do
we don't need that. We're working on legacy stuff forever.
Right,
we're very happy.
We're not moving to inverters. These single stage and two stage work great for us for 30 years.
Right,
Why would I want to change my business plan?
It's like a photography class. We only work on Polaroids.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's getting if we see there's changes, we need to take the time out of our busy schedules, all of us, and show up at these schools, because when we participate in the program advisory committees, we can change the curriculum by helping them. They now understand the change. They understand that they have a resource. They may not know how to teach it. So Ty, guess what? I'm your guest presenter. I'll be happy to come in Tuesday night.
All right.
It's building a partnership. So when we see the problems, our goal as industry organizations needs to be, how can I help you eliminate all these obstacles to achieve these goals?
Yeah, 100%. And so when it comes back to preparing a curriculum for a school, Danielle, we've talked about projects that we're working together. Tell us about some of the resources that are already established and future resources that we're going to have, especially in the CO2 realm.
Yeah, no, I love what Howard's saying about addressing the problems. That's foundational to the forming of our organization, and why we were formed in the first place was stakeholders from the supermarket industry saw the potential with naturals to be the most climate friendly, the most future proof option for compliance and regulatory standards. And they also saw the obstacles and that it was going to take everybody from the industry working together on those obstacles to overcome them. And absolutely, technician training and the workforce is the critical path.
So Daniel, let me just share something. I go to a lot of program advisory committees, which are, every school's required to have 2 meetings a year, industry stakeholders. Our team does. We also look at the minutes from all these meetings, and at most of them, you have to have 3 people there for the meeting to be held. Usually it's just the bare minimum.
Isn't that crazy?
So everyone says, I need these things done, but no one's actually there doing what they can to drive this change. So The manufacturers you work with, if I could drive one thing to them, find the local schools in their area, go, see what they're teaching. It's like buying a car. I live in Colorado, so I want an all-wheel drive vehicle.
Right.
Eugene lives in Florida. He wants something more economical, maybe a convertible. I look at the students as a product I'm buying. I need to understand how many hours is your program? What are you actually teaching? Let me see the equipment, the tools. Great, I got a picture of what you're doing. Now let me help you take it to the 21st century.
Yes.
And it's about partnerships.
Absolutely. When we look at the expansion of CO2, where do you see? I know we have a lot of grocery refrigeration, but I'm also seeing stationary refrigeration that are starting to work with CO2 products. Where do you see the largest growth in the refrigeration industry for CO2 products and the need for training?
Yeah, so we did a survey of our retailer members last year, and the survey was actually driven by a problem in the industry. We were hearing about a shortage of CO2 gas.
Oh.
No one could find R744 in the specific purity levels that we thought were
Really?
required.
Okay.
So it came up in our retailer roundtable, and we decided to explore it. And so one of the things we did is surveyed all of our retailer members. What does your growth in CO2 look like over the next 5 years?
Yeah.
How many new stores are you building? How many existing
technicians?
stores
Yeah.
are you going to replace
Yes.
with CO2? We were shocked at the numbers. And I think everyone else who was doing their own numbers behind the scenes was shocked too. The growth is amazing. 300% over the next 5 years.
Really?
I will say we are doing a follow-up survey this year because now that the technology transition has moved from what we thought was going to be 2025 to 2027,
Yes.
we want to see if that's going to make a difference.
Make a shift in that? Yeah.
Because the big spike started in 2025.
Wow.
And so that led us back to square one, which was how are we going to make sure we have the workforce
Yeah,
ready
absolutely.
and trained
Yeah.
for this transition, right? So supply chain we can fix. That's enough time to get ready for. The workforce is going to
It's a whole
be
other scenario.
a decade or longer to really get there. And so we started from, the point that we were closest to, which was the technicians. So we put together this training summit. For the first time, it was a grand experiment that went amazingly well.
Nice.
And we trained now, almost close to 1,000 technicians.
Wow.
We're bringing it all over the country. And from there, those training events that bring together all the different manufacturers, all the controls, the OEMs, everybody that's working in CO2 and propane to one place where a technician can get trained by all of them, right? And they can start from zero. They can show up having no experience with CO2 whatsoever and walk away feeling a little more comfortable. I won't say that they're an expert by any
but
means.
you're at least introduced into the equipment itself and the requirements for working on the equipment.
From there, we get to... Oh, do you want to say something?
I just wanted to say about that, the summit that you did. Nobody knew exactly how it would turn out. And I hear all the time, well, that new stuff isn't going to work. It's not going to be there. And when you did that summit, there were people that were a lot older than me. And there was a lot of people that were way younger than me. This whole entire group of people all across our industry, and there was manufacturers there that are normally struggling for the same space, but they're there working side by side in training, and you get to meet the people that are ahead of this stuff. And it was just an amazing event. You got to see how many people are interested in it and driving it, and I thought that was monumental.
It was magical, really, the energy level that was there from what you're saying, the students. So one of the things that was obvious to us is once we knew we were going to get all these technicians there, we're like, we got to get the schools to send the students.
To participate. Yeah, absolutely.
And what we didn't expect was the interest from the faculty side to actually come to the training, because they said, you know what, there's nowhere we can go to get CO2 training. So they came to the training, they sent their students to the networking session. The students from that, meet and greet, network with the industry, learn a little bit more about what it means to be in this career path, and then we built backwards from there. So from there, having those relationships established with schools, many of whom are going to be, using the CO2 curriculum once it gets out, we thought, what can we do to kind of build up to that so they're ready to go with that CO2 curriculum? Training the faculty members came up over and over in every interview. So we are working now on a pilot in Southern California with the community colleges there to develop, it's going to be an online module followed up by a hands-on field module.
Nice.
So you
Like
get a
the
little
sound
bit
of
of
that.
both. You get your classroom time to
Yeah.
get some of the
Get
basics,
prepared
some of the
for it.
vocabulary,
Sure.
and then you go out in the field.
Yeah.
And we're leveraging our grocery partners, our technician training centers, our OEM training centers as the field training. So they get different options, ranging from a training center that's a safe space
Yeah.
to a live rack that we can pump down, turn off, whatever, troubleshoot, and really get them engaged and comfortable with the technology. So we're hoping that's going to go a long way to complement the adoption of the CO2 curriculum.
Absolutely.
And just really help it happen as quickly as possible.
Man, I could see a CO2 session at the 2025 conference.
Well, 2024, we actually have a whole track of CO2 sessions.
Yes.
Many of the same people that
They'll be
you
in
have
this
at your event.
Yeah, our new training director, Rusty Walker, is going to be there
Right.
doing
Yeah.
CO2 training.
Trevor Matthews will be there. I'd have to
Absolutely.
look at the schedule. Kaiser Warren, there's going to be quite a few. But I see a lot of parallels to what we were talking about earlier. So
yeah.
we were talking this morning about cold climate heat pumps, the whole initiative. So do we train the current workforce or the future workforce?
Yes.
Both. Okay.
Yes
So
is the answer.
the future workforce, there's a lot to get that integrated into the curriculum and all the things we talked about. But the current workforce that's out there, this upskill training,
Yeah.
it's a matter of a lot of people say, well, I don't have time. I'm working these long hours. My daughter has to go to dance. We have scout meetings, whatever. They could take classes online. We're developing a curriculum, and which you're leading.
Yeah.
And then they could go to the school, take a little hands-on element, take a test, and they now meet the new initiatives from Department of Energy for cold climate heat pumps.
Absolutely. So it shows that we have a significant growth opportunity in our industry that absolutely needs to start in the classroom. It also needs to start with technicians themselves that have already been in the field. I know for myself, I was a grocery refrigeration technician. And when I first started having these conversations on CO2, I contacted Trevor. I said, I'd like for us to do a overview of CO2 on the show because there's a lot of technicians like myself that know CO2 is coming and have never touched it. Very much like you, Ty. It's like I know some fundamentals, but I've not gotten my hands on that. And I'm kind of afraid to stick my neck out and teach in an area that I don't have much experience on. But then when you look at the entire CO2 development, you realize, well, everyone is learning as we go because it is an emerging technology.
So the very first time I learned about CO2 was at the HVAC Excellence Conference. I went to the conference, I learned about CO2. There's so much, I was just fascinated. And at that time, I think there was only like 6 supermarkets in the entire country that had
testing.
CO2.
Right.
And it was being used in Europe and Canada, but in the US, it was just hardly any. And I thought, man, this is going to be something. And so many people told me, no, it's not. And it's here. I mean, I don't even know how many supermarkets use CO2, but it's just, in Texas, they even have them where they said it would never work, and it's being used. And I think also the curriculum is so it's overlooked too much. We can get the information from the manufacturers, but you have to shift through that and then find out what's important. And then you have to get that information and be able to present it to a student.
Redeliver it.
And even if you have the greatest information, we've been into the classes, and you're trying to present something and you're trying to stay awake and you can't. You want the information, so how we present that. So by having a curriculum, all that separation and focusing on certain points is already being done for you. Then the instructor can follow that and then add that pizzazz, add that excitement to the class. Then they can take those bits of information and apply it to the field. So having that curriculum is a lot of work. And if anybody's ever ridden through an installation manual, I mean, it's important, but it's dry. And then if you've ever tried to write curriculum or put a class together, that is so much work. I can't tell you how much work that is. So it's easy to say, oh, that curriculum. But I tell you, until you've actually written curriculum, you don't understand how heavy of a lift that is and how, I mean, it drags you down. And so the fact that there's a team of people of thinking in all parts of the industry, putting this curriculum together, putting the most important parts in, and it's not just one person, it's multiple manufacturers, industries working together to put this, and then you can take that information and customize it to your school, your local needs. And that's a whole industry working together for education, for the future of what we do.
Yeah, love it.
There's one other thing I want to highlight that we're working on that's tangential, but I think will support this effort to get the workforce training up and running, and that's a program that is being funded in California. It's a $65 million program that we are administering to give incentives for folks to replace HFC-based equipment with natural equipment.
Very interesting.
And it's through the Air Resources Board. It's a program we've been working on standing up for a few years now, but it's a model for other states who are looking to achieve their climate targets, make use of IRA funding that's become available through the climate pollution reduction grants.
Yep.
And so these are options. We're looking to expand the program, but we're still launching the California program, but that's going to really drive adoption of CO2 and other alternatives very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And so the schools need to be ready for that. It's happening now, and it's going to happen fast.
And that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about preparing the classrooms, taking advantage of the opportunities to look at your program and go, okay, we need to update our programs. Maybe we now have someone from the industry that is showing up to our program advisory committee that is telling us that we need to prepare our classrooms for this transitions of refrigerants and technologies. Are there funds out there available? Do I qualify for funds? Can I participate in IRA? Are there ways that we can actually grow together to bring the technology into the classroom faster? So we see things like Perkins funds. We see a variety of opportunities. If I'm in California, I see now state initiatives, plus we have federal initiatives. So there are a lot of avenues for modifying our classrooms and applying for funds to do that.
So last week alone, I was at a grand opening of a brand new Daikin training center within a United Association, UA, local. It's a partnership. They realize we have to start rethinking how we do education.
That's right.
So manufacturers are here. Ty kind of hit it. A2Ls, cold climate heat pumps, inverter technology, VRV, next generation technologies are here. People don't like it. Sorry, it's here.
That's right.
There's not much you could do about it, okay? So it's the idea. How many people worked at Eastman Kodak Company and said, oh, people are going to take pictures forever? Yeah, they will. They just won't need you. I'm trying to tell a lot of contractors out there right now, if you're not paying attention, you will be like Eastman Kodak Company or Borders or like Blockbuster Video, gone.
Yeah.
Because the technology's changing that quick.
Oh, I can't even hardly find a rebuild kit for a carburetor these days. You have to replace it because the technology took such a transition.
So I want to share something. Tom Grunstraw, the National Training Director of Fujitsu, said something at our conference 2 years ago. Said, we can't believe the number of people are graduating from school who don't even know how to use a multimeter.
Right.
The very basic foundation. So the problem is, a lot of contractors we've talked about have said, I don't like some of these schools because they're not teaching the right things. So if we really want to blow up the whole education system and start over, let's start here. If you actually show up at a program on the program advisory committee, you can help reformulate what that program could be.
Yes.
Make it. You have some great teachers out there, but they can't do it alone. They need support of their industry partners.
Indeed.
They have a limited budget. Yes, Perkins could do it. There's grants. There's a grant writer at your school. If you don't care who gets credit for it, ask them. Help me understand how to fill this out. You could dot the I's, cross the T's. You can have all the credit. I just want all the equipment.
I think we should do a show on that sometime,
Yeah.
by the way. That
And
sounds like
so
a
there's-
great topic to cover.
There's so many ways that if you're really creative to get things. So at that UA local last week, I saw a bus, a traveling bus. What was it? It's a mobile classroom. Now they have lots of mobile trainers with lots of equipment. This didn't have equipment. It was a mobile classroom with the sole purpose of going to high schools, spending 6 weeks there at a time, teaching the basic fundamentals of the trades. That was paid 100% by a grant because someone at that school was smart enough to look at all the opportunities available. And I'm only bringing it up because a lot of people say, well, there's no way I can bring in what you're doing or what you're doing.
Yeah,
I
we
just
hear that
don't
all the
have
time.
I don't have the resources to do it.
Sure.
There are. You just need the right industry partners that help you.
Love.
We talk a lot about new students and bringing people into the industry, but there's a huge market for existing people out there. One of the questions I get asked a lot is people that are aggravated. They work in residential and they're being asked to sell stuff. Sell, not replace anything. I hear this a lot.
Sure.
And that's a separate topic of why, but I'm telling these people, if you like to fix things, if you like to understand how things work, start looking at the commercial, look at CO2 systems. It's going to take
Absolutely.
education. Use that anger to drive you to learn CO2 because nobody's going to walk into a supermarket and be like, oh yeah, you need to replace this rack because I don't know what's wrong with it.
Right.
Like, you have to find out, diagnose what's wrong with it and quick. So I think there's a huge opportunity for people that are maybe stuck or plateaued where they are or aggravated where they are there's other levels of learning in this trade. You can never learn all this trade. I try, and it's just overwhelming how much is out there. But looking at CO2, and there's all these resources out there making it available. And schools aren't just for people just coming in. There's a lot of programs for existing technicians. And sometimes you have to admit you don't know something. When I got into teaching, I had to admit quickly there's so much stuff I don't know.
Yeah.
And the more that I learn, the more I realize I don't know.
It's a journey.
But something we should probably touch base on. You're talking a little bit about training and workforce education, upskilling. So school enrollment nationally is down about 40% over the last 10 years.
Significant.
So when you start thinking about it, this chair I'm sitting in is what's called an FTE, a full-time equivalent, which might mean it's $7,000 to $10,000 to put a body in it. So it's a lot cheaper. Oh, let's teach Psych 101, not HVAC, because I can have 150 people here instead of 12 and no equipment cost. Well, when you keep looking at declining enrollment, right now, let's take a look. Whether we're talking about natural refrigerants, cold climate heat pumps, the people who have been working in this industry for years, they need somewhere to go to get this training.
Absolutely.
Your school could be that
the place
that they go. It's a new source of revenue. Hate to say it. You're a community college, you're still a business. It's a new source of revenue. And in some cases, there's even federal programs funded by the IRA.
Absolutely.
To actually, so we were just talking to Jamie Kono this morning from Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. Each state got roughly $150 million for training people on cold climate heat pumps. The problem is the money didn't go to the schools. It went to the state energy offices. So they gave the money to people who have no ability to train. Now you have all the schools that could train, and we sometimes feel like a dysfunctional dating service.
Trying to make all the connections.
Introducing the state energy offices to the state community colleges so they can actually create this training. And all I'm getting at is there's a tremendous opportunity for what they call upskilling. Yes. Take people and bring them in for these short courses, couple hours, couple days.
Yeah, I think the challenge is, that the existing system's broken, right? So it's not that we're trying to layer on CO2 to a successful model. It's like the whole model needs to be rethought from the get-go. And so that's part of what we're trying to reimagine here and think about it in a way that engages the community, that leverages our most powerful asset, which is all the existing technicians everybody who's working in this industry who stands to benefit from that up-leveling of the workforce.
Well, I think one of the things I mentioned earlier, one of the problems is, Ty, if you're a doctor, you have multiple doctors teaching you each and every discipline, but we have one teacher in most programs. But the beauty is now that in COVID, everyone learned this technology called business conference platform, Zoom, WebEx, et cetera.
Absolutely.
There's a subject matter expert who could be your guest presenter on any given night coming to you through one of those programs. Right.
Indeed. Yeah, a lot of new things to talk about with ways to deliver content into the classrooms, new technologies, new refrigerants, and let's talk about how to connect with your resources currently.
Yeah, so the best way to connect for us is go to our website, nasrc.org. You can also email us at info@nasrc.org. And yeah, everything is there. Everything we do is a public resource as a 501c3 nonprofit.
Fantastic.
And which conferences or which summits did you have this year? Where were they at?
So we did our first one in Irwindale, Southern California.
Which I went to. Amazing. Great job.
Yeah, we're going back there again in April. So that's co-hosted with Southern California Edison, the utility. We've had some great opportunities to partner with the local unions and their fantastic training centers. So that's where we did in St. Louis with Local 562. And then next we're going to Pittsburgh in March 19th through 21st. We'll be there with the Local 449's training center. So.
Nice. Yeah, 449 is one of my favorite places to go look at technologies, old technologies, new technologies. It's one of the partnerships that we're talking about with Daikin, where we're starting to see our manufacturers working with our training organizations. Now we have other industry organizations working with our manufacturers, working with our training institutes to bring these technologies into a hands-on environment. So I'm very excited to see that continually growing. And I encourage all of our programs to start looking at these new refrigerants, these new technologies, being at the forefront. We talk about this all the time. We see schools that are just barely getting students through a program to learn how to use a meter, but we also see programs that are teaching some of the most advanced technologies, and they want to know where to find those resources. They want to bring it into the programs. And unfortunately, they don't have enough people from their community pushing for those technologies. So we truly hope that we see more involvement from our industry with our local communities, trying to support new technologies, new refrigerants, and making this industry. Ty, you brought up a while ago, we don't show the entire industry to enough people. Unfortunately, too many times in our programs, we show residential installation and we show residential service, and it doesn't get much past that. We don't show them that they have the opportunity to learn these types of technologies, that they could work in these commercial and industrial environments, and that it's a very interesting, intriguing place to be, especially with generations that are growing up with technology. Now they have the opportunity to not only help the environment, improve their life, improve the life of those around them, but also integrate technology into their career. And I love what is happening in our industry. And sometimes we feel like a bell ringer and there's no one wanting to listen, but we are seeing that shift. We are just talking about your summit. We're seeing educators stepping out of their comfort zone, looking at new technologies and going, okay, maybe this is something we need to incorporate.
So you hit on something, you're talking about young people and what motivates them and what they grew up with.
Absolutely. It's different than our generation, for sure.
We have a generation that grew up with COVID.
Yes.
They grew up as, I'll call them the COVID kids.
Yes.
And if they really think about it, so most students, all they think about residential technician.
Right.
What's an airborne infection isolation room?
Ooh,
when you walk in a hospital, here's a room right here, someone has COVID. The person in the next room doesn't. How is that possible? That's a specialty HVAC technician.
That's right.
Oh, you were taking classes online, WebEx or Zoom. How's that possible? The data center cooling technician or refrigeration. We've talked about this. Our industry's a lot bigger than people realize.
Oh, absolutely.
Our problem is we do a poor job of really telling people who we are.
Yeah.
COVID was and still is the perfect example to explain how'd your food get in the grocery store, what's going on behind the scenes at a hospital, indoor air quality at a school. We could go on and do a 4-hour episode on that.
Yeah, absolutely. All things related to our industry that we just don't talk about enough, unfortunately.
Well, air conditioning is cool, right? It's literally cool. Cozy and warm in the winter. It's nice, right? But if we really think about refrigeration, there's 7.88 billion people in the world. And that's only possible because of transportation and refrigeration. So we could lose our air conditioners, it'd be super uncomfortable. But if we lost refrigeration, we would have a very bad impact. So refrigeration is essential to what we do. And the changing technologies and what's happening with refrigeration is so important. And the technology is going to be changing. And so I love the fact that we have organizations here that are working together, that we have HVAC Excellence putting together, that we can get this information out and train people. The first time I went to HVAC Excellence and I learned about CO2, I was so excited. I was like a little kid, like learning about new stuff, learning about physics. And then when I went to the summit, it was amazing seeing all of these manufacturers here, the people that I just hear about or read about, like they're there, you get to talk to them in person. And then they had the trainer from Danfoss there, the actual CO2 trainer, and their head trainers there, and you get to see all this in person. It was quite the feat.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Well, any last minute topics we'd like to cover? We've talked about resources for NASRC. You can learn more about ESCO Institute HVAC Excellence at escogroup.org. We invite all you to join us at our national conference. It'll be March 24th through the 27th in Las Vegas. So we encourage everyone that comes to AHR to see the new technologies, to see what the equipment looks like, and then come to our conference and let's talk about them. Let's learn how to work on them, and let's learn about the resources to be able to introduce those into our classrooms.
I know, I'm pretty sure who I'm